Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Dr. Shanina Knighton, thank you so much for joining us as our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I know you're incredibly busy and you have an amazing resume, and I'm excited to talk about all of the amazing things you're doing. Thank you so much for being here. I'm truly honored to have you.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for having me.
So like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So we're going to go through your life story with your permission, starting with where you were born all the way up to today, and then we can talk about all the amazing things that you're doing to help people to help people keep their health going. And infection prevention, the whole thing. This is amazing stuff you're doing. So let's start with where you were born.
Yes, so I was born in Cleveland, Ohio.
Awesome.
At Booth Memorial. So it was a military hospital here in Cleveland, Ohio.
So why a military hospital?
So my father, so I actually have two fathers, but my biological father is a veteran. So that was the reason for there.
I got you. Okay. So did you grow up in Chula Vista or at Chula Vista? Did you grow up in Cleveland?
I did grow up in Cleveland, so stayed here, born and raised. Moved about 13 times by the time I was 12.
Wow.
Yeah, so a significant amount of times. Have two siblings that I was raised with in the same home. Education, while it's something that's important to me now, was not heavily reinforced. So amongst my siblings, cousins, first in my family to finish high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you went
And
on to get a PhD.
yes.
How awesome. I
Yes.
love this. I just
Thank
love your story. I know you.
you. Thank you.
So you moved 13 times.
Yes.
And where did you go to high school?
So I went to Cleveland Public Schools, and so I went to John Marshall High School. So it's now an engineering school. But at that time, so we're talking about 2002 when I graduated, the graduation rate was less than 18%.
Wow.
Yes, for the whole district. So learned early on, I was going to say just through upbringing, I learned to play opposites, or I would say dream my way out of poverty. So just really thinking through, if my parents did not go and get an education, then maybe I should, as a way to be able to amplify what it is that I wanted to be in life. If we were staying, in a homeless shelter. So I've stayed in homeless shelters throughout the duration of my life. And even during those times, I would always dream about living in a home. I would dream of stability and used school and education as my escape to be able to think through what could a better life be. And so I talk about infection prevention now, Mike, but prevention has always been in my vein, I would say. So if it was alcoholism that was in my home, prevent alcohol. If it was drugs in my home, prevent drugs. So just really playing opposites in a manner for which I learned that would benefit me later as a result of learning the why behind the why.
So it sounds like you have a particular appreciation for how you grew up because it
Yes.
really formed you into who you are today.
Absolutely. So much so, even with fitness, with family, so just raising children. So being so much so into self-improvement and just thinking through ways to do things better. How do I make things better in a manner for which maybe I didn't see? And that's honestly why I love nursing, I love science, and I love infection prevention because these are things that people can't see that may be harming them, but you're getting them to where it is that they need to go.
So you're a certified nurse who also earned your PhD.
Yes, I'm a registered nurse and I have a PhD in nursing. So I study the science behind care. And I'm an infection preventionist, which means that I study the science and I investigate ways for us to prevent the transmission of infections.
That is just amazing to me. I am so blown away by you. So let me go back for just a second, if it's okay. So when you went to high school, I understand that the graduation rate was really low, that kind of thing. And obviously Cleveland Public Schools has some work to do. But did you have a particular favorite subject in high school?
So I didn't. I did
Okay.
not. Um, which is interesting. I didn't have a favorite subject then. I would say math, I used to think was my favorite, but I had this teacher. I'll never forget, I was taking honors math. And if you did not do the structure of the problem the way that she did, she marked everything 50% off, even if the answer was right.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
yes, I
That's a
got
little rough.
it is. And
And this is a
actually,
high school math teacher?
this is a high school math teacher, and I was taking
Wow.
honors. I might have been taking trigonometry or something. And so, long story short, I saw this lady maybe about 10 years ago, and I reminded her about me getting an F. And she's long
Oh,
retired.
oh my
But that
God.
had such a detrimental effect on me at that time because I'm like, well, I'm getting the answers right. And I found my own methodology. But
Right.
she had this thing of where you had to do it in her particular way. So math, I started to deviate away from it a little bit. And I think had I stuck with it, I think I would have been more geared towards STEM early on, which
Yeah.
is where I ultimately landed.
Right.
But I would have liked it a lot more then. But I would also say chemistry.
So when you left high school,
Mhm.
where did you go from there?
So I went to Baldwin Wallace College, which is located in Berea, Ohio.
Okay.
And that came by way of a Upward Bound program. So there's these trio programs that occur. And if you're a first generation graduate, then you get these opportunities to participate in college prep programs on Saturdays. You may travel around to different colleges to see how they are. And with this program, we spent 2 weeks on campus as a part of the college experience. And so they gave us scholarship money. And so when I applied to different historically Black colleges, I had the best financial aid package. The loan amounts from the historically Black colleges scared me a little bit. So
Mhm.
I ended up at Baldwin Wallace. And my major there was sports medicine.
Okay.
And I took this chemistry course. And I'll tell you, Mike, mind you, I told you Cleveland Public Schools has made a drastic change. So they're so much better now.
Yeah,
But
that's
back then, what I took as my 2 years of chemistry in high school was my first 2 weeks of chemistry in college. So my peers, they already had the textbooks. They
they
had
were
had
way ahead of you.
yeah, they were way ahead of me. So the textbooks that they had in college or that I was getting in college, they had already seen in high school.
Mhm.
So when I got my first chemistry test back, it was a 17%.
Oh my gosh.
And it's only 3 tests throughout the whole entire semester. So 17%. But I knew, I was like, "I can't go back home."
Yeah.
So I'll never forget, I went and met with, Professor Jim McCarger, which, by the way, is such an amazing guy. So he ended up being the chemistry chair and doing some things academically for Baldwin Wallace. But I told him, I said, "I need help in terms of being able to understand how to study."
Mhm.
The work came easy, but I realized I didn't know how to study. And so he said, "Well, let's go over some study strategies." I got so good at studying that I sometimes would even correct his work. And one of those memorable students for him, he was like, "You sure you don't want to be a chemistry major? Like you would be really good at it."
Yeah.
But it was so special with Dr. McCarger because being a first generation, there's challenges that we have that others may not have,
Yeah.
meaning you still may have, let's say, your family that are having utilities that are being turned off. There still are going to be challenges in regards to poverty that may occur at home. But he had a way in which of being able to understand them and being able to relate and just remind me that it's gonna come down to my resilience. It's gonna come down to me really being able to fight through those things and understanding what I can change and what I couldn't change. So I ended up finishing that class with a 74%. But I
Wow.
would tell you, I love chemistry to this day, and that is the best grade that I've ever had, or the one that I'm most appreciative of because I know how hard I had to work to
So
get it
17% all the way to 74, that's a
out of
major jump.
exactly, out of 3 tests, and so I just that in itself, I would say it was one of my most resilient moments, and so college was sports medicine. Then I met this wonderful man, while I was in college, who is now my husband, and long story short, I was finishing up school, he was finishing up school, and voila, there comes the first kid, and so we finished up college on the same day, but I was also a mom, and I will tell you that life changed the moment that I met my son. I knew I wanted to be a nurse. And it was all because of a nurse taking care of me and a nursing student. So I finished up my degree and then went on to become a nurse because I said, where in a profession could you give love to a stranger and it be the most empathetic and compassionate thing ever? And so that's how I actually went into nursing.
See, that's important. Major, major important. And the reason I say that is people go to work every day, right? And they do what they do. They might be a nurse, they might be a real estate agent, they might be a
Yeah.
mortgage loan officer, they might be whatever, right? But the way that you treat people
Yes.
has an impact on their lives that far exceeds what your, far outreaches what you feel like is your world, right?
Yes.
The better you, and I'm a huge believer of this, the
Mhm.
better. So people, Maya Angelou always, one of her famous quotes is, people will forget what you did for a living,
Yes.
but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Yep.
And so when I go out and into the world, right, when I'm doing my podcast, I'm doing all the things I do, speaking in public, teaching, all that, that's one of the things that I try to remember is people will remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And that's a big, big deal. And I hope that nurse knows how she inspired you.
So get this, it's such a small world that the nursing student and the nurse that was taking care of me was affiliated with Case Western Reserve, where I then would later on go to school and be able to
That's
teach.
right. That's right. I
So
saw that in your bio. Yeah.
yeah, so it ended up coming full circle in that experience, and so I knew now mind you, I had just did sports medicine, I had did my observation hours, I was planning on taking the next step, into a doctorate of physical therapy program. I left the hospital not only as a new mom, but was like, "No, I'm gonna become a nurse."
Wow.
So I enrolled into a diploma nursing program here, and I worked my way up the ranks. And the next thing I know, we were at the H1N1 pandemic. So I got this small kid at home. And at that time, so we're fast forwarding a couple of years, I had also become pregnant with our second child.
Mhm.
But H1N1 was there, and there was this big scare that if you were pregnant, you were at higher risk. Infection prevention was a thing, but we didn't have masks. So you
Mhm.
weren't told to mask then for H1N1. We were then having to stick the swabs down people's nose into their nasopharyngeal cavity. So imagine going up the nose and then going all the way back just to make sure. And people would cough, they would sneeze, all of these things, right? And we were, of course, told to clean our hands. And I was questioning, even early on from the time of being a student, is why is it that we clean our hands, but patients don't?
Right.
And as I started to think about infection prevention and control, I became highly interested in it because I was trying to not only do my best to protect patients, but how do I protect my babies? How do I protect my husband? people, you know, around me that I didn't want to take these germs home to.
Right.
So that's how I started to get into infection prevention and control. I specifically started to focus around patients. So, and I don't know, Mike, if you have been to see a loved one in the hospital recently, or I know you mentioned, you know, being hospitalized as well, but they don't provide you with anything to clean your hands with.
It's true.
But we're all at risk for these healthcare associated infections that are around in the environment. So then I was told, no, it's not healthcare work. We only care about healthcare workers, not patients. And I just wouldn't let it go. So the next thing I know, I'm at the nursing school and I'm like, hey, I don't want to be a nurse practitioner. I don't want to be this. I just want to study germs on patients' hands and I want to study patient hand hygiene. I said, if it's not a thing as a nurse, I'll let it go. I said, I won't think anything else about it. I'll let it go. But along that journey, I had a sixth grade teacher. So, one thing I didn't share, just going back a little bit, is you have those teachers, you have friends, you have family members. There's people along the way to help you out through life. And so I know that I got here because I say God sent me those angels along the way.
I
Some of
totally
them to
agree with
stay.
that.
Yeah. So some of them to stay, some of them temporary. But this one in particular, Mike, from the time of sixth grade through eighth grade, and even still when I went on to move to college, this teacher was always there. And in sixth grade, so again, I told you all of these times that I moved around, I always had a ride to school because of that teacher,
That's
which
awesome.
was, yeah, which was amazing. When it came down to moving into college, she moved me into college. She did end up passing away 12 years ago from breast cancer at the age of 44. Yeah, so she was fairly young.
Way too young. Yeah.
But yeah, but the ironic thing is on her last days, I remember her saying, I said, "Well, why didn't you eat your food?" And she said, "No one came in to clean my hands." The same thing happened as well that same exact year with my husband's grandmother. She had had a stroke, and I said, "Well, why haven't you eaten?" And she held her hand up and was showing me that it was dirty. And so it came full circle because just as that teacher had cared for me, I had the opportunity to care for her in her last days to make sure that she cleaned her hands. And because things like that happened, it further solidified that I was on the right path of what I was doing, meshing nursing, meshing infection prevention and control, meshing my other hat, you know, which we may touch on a little bit of becoming more submerged into biomedical engineering and learning how to make things to help people.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into nursing. That's how nursing expanded. So I ended up in this PhD program because they're like, well, we don't have all of those other programs, but it sounds like you need a PhD. I'm like, a PhD? Me? I'm like, what am I getting ready to do with a PhD?
I'm a nurse, right?
I'm a nurse. Had never heard of a PhD in nursing. And they were like, well, you said you want to study this problem. That's science.
Mhm.
So I'll tell you, I had some wonderful people that were around me. They were like, you can do it. Oh, you're finishing up your Bachelor of Science in Nursing? No worries. Just make sure that you're enrolled by January.
Wow.
I took, I kid you not, I can't make this up. I took 9 classes over one summer
Wow.
and finished up with a 3.8 GPA,
Oh,
full-time mom, okay, to
yeah.
2 small kids. And, also actually, no. So a mom, but a full-time nurse. So I still got these 2 kids, but then I'm also a nurse. So I then applied to the program. I find out that I'm carrying my 3rd child,
Oh my gosh.
and then find out I get a full ride for this fellowship that I had applied to.
Oh, awesome. Just awesome.
But I was like, I have no choice. I have to do it all.
Yeah.
So with that came resilience, of course, of time management. So
Mhm.
even still to this day, if the day starts for me at 5 a.m., my calendar is written out what I'm doing from 5 a.m. to 5:30.
Yeah.
It might be written down for what I'm doing from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Right.
just to make sure that I'm fitting in family. I'm fitting in, let's say focused on finances, my education, whatever needed to be important at that time. And I was able to finish in 3.5 years. And I kid you not, 7 days of finishing in 2017, my youngest was turning 4. So it was like this trajectory of me being able to have her.
Yeah.
And so from there, I just kept going. But I had ventured over to the biomedical engineering department and said, hey, I need to develop this device, and this is what it needs to do. Through that process, I learned how to make things.
Mhm.
Through the process of, let's say, making things, I ended up teaching. So I teach engineering students now. So I'm actually the first nurse at Case to have an appointment over in the engineering department.
Wow. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.